This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Folks, we're back. This is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC. And now I am privileged to have as our guest Jeff Clarke. Jeff Clarke served as the Assistant Attorney General in the Trump administration. He has had an eminent legal career spanning over 25 years. There have never been any questions about his ethics or his legal acumen. There's never been any questions raised about his performance as a public servant prior to January of 2021. He also served in the Bush administration, which is the first time I met him, when he was Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Environmental and Natural Resources Division of the DOJ from 2001 to 2005, fighting against overregulation and winning awards from the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, and most importantly from the Pentagon for protecting this nation's naval readiness. Now, however, because of legal opinions that he stands by, Jeff Clarke has become a target. Jeff Clarke is fighting disbarment proceedings simply because he rendered political opinions for President Trump that to this day he believes in and he defends. Former Assistant Attorney General Jeff Clarke was once oversaw one of two of Main Justice's divisions, the litigation division, where he was in charge of 1,400 lawyers. He is a man who I believe is of the highest integrity. And in America, you are innocent until proven guilty. This poor man has been smeared as nauseum. What they really fear is that he might hold on to his law license and therefore come back into public service in a second Trump administration. So I wanted to bring him on today to tell you about the law that is the war that is being waged against him, what it's all about, and then most importantly, after you've heard him make a case for himself, how you can help him. So Jeff Clarke, thank you so much for joining us on the Roger Stone Show.
Well, Roger, it's great to be here, and I'm glad that you remember our meeting in the Bush 43 administration at the Justice Department. I remember it well. You were a legendary political figure, and I was very much interested in that meeting. And, here we are, both of us having been targets of intense leftist lawfare. Having them come after you to the extent of trying to put you in jail for doing nothing. And, I've also been made a defendant in Fani Willis's ridiculous RICO case in Georgia, which, there's so many flaws in that case, I don't even know where to begin. But the thing that I'm facing most immediately in terms of this vile lawfare effort is the attempt to disbar me, as you noted, by the D.C. bar, which is, just like D.C. itself, dominated by Democrats. Indeed, the initial chair when the case against me started of the D.C. Board of Professional Responsibility was a lawyer who brought a case for civil plaintiffs against President Trump for ostensibly causing the January 6th riot, right? So how can you possibly, when you're under the authority of a Board of Professional Responsibility like that, that guy is clearly biased, right? He has a massive conflict of interest, yet he's one of the chief ethics enforcers in D.C. When we pointed that out, he quickly withdrew. But it's just emblematic of the fact that what I'm really being hunted for, as you noted, is an attempt to try to destroy me so that if President Trump does return to the White House, that I couldn't possibly return to the Department of Justice to help him there and to help the country from there.
So to make this a little more understandable, what specific action did you take that has unleashed all hell upon you and this deep state effort just to destroy you?
Well, Roger, it all traces to a letter that was drafted and was never sent and was entirely privileged. It was, completely done in the sanctums of the main Justice Department, the Robert F. Kennedy building on 9th and Pennsylvania in D.C., and discussed and debated in the Oval Office of the White House. And yet, and there was a meeting that I participated in on January 3rd, 2021, and I'm, been instructed by President Trump to maintain a whole series of privileges, the chief one of which being executive privilege about that meeting. But others apparently, and all of the other people in the meeting, 6 others, were lawyers. They apparently didn't view themselves as bound by these ethical principles. And so because I was the person they were disagreeing with in terms of how to proceed about investigating the election and about this, letter giving Georgia an option to have its legislature continue to investigate the integrity of the election, irregularities about it, and call themselves into special session, they leaked to the New York Times in an effort to destroy me and paint a narrative that President Trump and I were working on a coup to take over the United States, which is the stupidest thing imaginable. And again, violated every legal privilege in the book. And yet they have their law licenses. They're not being investigated. Only President Trump and I are being investigated and targeted. And it really, it makes me angry. I'm a very temperate person, Roger. I'm very cerebral and intellectual, but it's so absurd that I have to go before the Democrat-dominated ethics process in D.C. to defend myself against, scurrilous allegations that, somehow I was trying to bring down the Republic. It's just the stuff of fantasy, although it's constantly put on CNN and MSNBC. It's vile, it's evil, and it is, it's really Marxist lawfare. It's something that I've learned is really actually traces to Marxism, not just the Soviet show trials, but even Maoism. And, we have to fight it with all ounces of our being, and I am definitely doing that, and I will do that for sure at the trial beginning on Tuesday if it starts as scheduled.
So your critics say that the letter you drafted was an attempted falsehood because they insist that there were no significant irregularities or anomalies in the 2020 election. Sitting here today, do you still believe that there were indeed irregularities and perhaps even fraud in the election results?
Yes, I do, Roger. And the letter focused on irregularities. And look, they can disagree with that. They can say our view is that there were no irregularities, right? Lawyers debate with each other and disagree with each other all the time. And if you've been in the Justice Department, if you've been inside 2 different presidential administrations, sometimes it almost feels like all we do is debate. You have meetings over at the White House where you debate whether the president should take some action, and then that gets recommended or not recommended to him. You debate whether regulations will come out and what they'll say. You debate whether some course of action is legal or what parameters are around it. And same thing inside the Justice Department. So my view is that the election was badly tainted. Let's just, start with the fact that it was hijacked by Zuckerbucks. And indeed, my organization, the Center for Renewing America, sent letters to the IRS about that being a complete violation of the tax law. And yet, we have Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, Priscilla Chan, and, they're still walking around, and they still, for the organizations they supported, especially this one, the Center for Tech and Civic Life, they're all still, got their tax exempt status. We have the fact that the that the states, through largely their executive officials or local election officials, changed the election law from the law that was set by the legislatures, and that's just flatly unconstitutional. Our Constitution says that the state legislatures set that law. They changed it under the guise of COVID, that it was an emergency that required the vast, expansion of mail-in ballots. We have the problems in Georgia of the fact that they did not do signature verification at all, which the law requires. And that's a second category, right? It's not just the fact that they changed the law outside of the state legislative process. They also violated the existing state law. So that just those two categories right there, they show you that there were significant irregularities with the election. Now, I think colleagues of mine who disagreed with that, they're all wet. They're totally wrong. But certainly the fact that I disagreed with them and that I proposed a different course for the Justice Department than they were charting, that's not unethical. This is just the way the process works. And it's the way you want the process to work. And it's the way, certainly, to have Article 2, the presidency, the executive branch, function as it's supposed to function. The president has to hear from advisors who have different views about things so that he can weigh them and decide how he wants to proceed. That's our constitutional system, Roger.
Obviously, the folks at the January 6th committee figured out from the White House call logs that you were actually the acting attorney general for about 9 hours. We also know that at one point, President Trump, realizing that the acting attorney general, Rosen, was not loyal to him or the administration, but acting as an agent for the permanent establishment, wanted to make you the acting attorney general. It's my understanding that Rosen and many others at the Department of Justice were adamant that you couldn't be attorney general because, I love this, you had never had any trial experience. Perhaps they never heard of Robert F. Kennedy, a man who served as attorney general who'd never been in a courthouse in his entire life. The president of the United States can choose any qualified individual to be appointed as attorney general. It is a perfect example about how those in the permanent bureaucracy in federal government disserved their presidency. Sounds to me like they are persecuting you, well, because you know how the Department of Justice works, and you also know how both the Department of Justice and the FBI can be fixed. That's why they want to take your law license, simply because you talked about a legal opinion, which you can certainly defend, that they don't agree with. It really is outrageous. Now, did you yourself work on any election cases?
I did, Roger, but before I tell you a little bit about those, right, let me say, comment on what you're saying about experience and the like, right? So it's really amazing to watch, my foes essentially try to paint me as someone who's unqualified or underqualified, right? It's true that both Attorney General Barr and then Deputy Attorney General Rosen, who then became acting Attorney General later, both of them, to my knowledge, have never tried a criminal case. But they were both, highly studied lawyers, and obviously Barr ran the department twice. So that's not a prerequisite to the job. But magically, to try to make me look bad, they tried to paint it as a prerequisite to the job. The second thing I would say is, look, there are 7 litigating divisions in the Justice Department. Okay. There's, I won't run through them all, but, there's criminal, there's civil, there's tax, there's antitrust, et cetera. I ran 2 of them. I was the only assistant attorney general who was picked to run 2 of them simultaneously. And Bill Barr himself picked me for that honor. So, it's total retconning for them to try to argue, and a lie, really, for them to try to argue that I was unqualified. So now on your question about, my work on election issues, I had to work on 2 big sets of election issues. One was litigation against the Postal Service because the left was panicking that they wouldn't be able to get their mail-in ballots in on time before the state election officials would say, hey, look, the door's closed. These things aren't postmarked properly and so on. And so they had litigation about that. I defended that litigation. So the idea that I didn't have anything to do with the election in terms of my official authorities at DOJ is also wrong. And then I also worked, and this is something that doesn't fit with their narrative, there was a lawsuit that was brought by the alternate electors in Arizona and by Louis Gohmert and some others that tried to get a declaration to, instruct Vice President Pence how he should proceed on January 6th. And look, if you're a lawyer in the Justice Department, in the executive branch, and especially one as high-ranking as I was, your duty is to defend the discretion of the president and the vice president, right? Vice presidential discretion doesn't come up very much, but, obviously 2020 and in the 2021 was a unique year. And so I defended that litigation, and I actually got it dismissed, first in the Eastern District of Texas and then in the Fifth Circuit. And then the Supreme Court didn't take it up. So if I were trying to plot to overthrow the United States and get President Trump in at any cost, despite the law, why would I have defended that lawsuit? It just doesn't fit. And, they don't care about these facts. The mainstream media doesn't report on them. They're at great pains to destroy me so that I cannot, return for a third tour of duty in high-ranking federal service, Roger.
Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
Your accomplishments on behalf of the United States are really quite incredible. Despite an attempt to block your confirmation, which was held up for an unprecedented 14 months, you were confirmed by the U.S. Senate with bipartisan support in October of 2018. You took office in November 1st, and you accomplished much for the American people. First of all, securing billions of dollars in penalties from those who were cheating the American people, defending President Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accords, which stripped America of jobs, offshoring those jobs to China and other places in the world for no good purpose, spearheading the first reform of the red tape-encrusted National Environmental Policy Act, which for the first time in 40 years, which among other things had slowed infrastructural renewal to an absolute crawl. I mean, in recognition for your track record in the environmental division, you were named as the acting attorney general of the civil division, overseeing some 100,000 plus lawyers with oversight responsibility in the Trump administration. To say that you were unqualified to be attorney general, that's pretty much a joke. Now it seems to me you have a partisan band conducting a new witch hunt against you. I understand very, very well this era of the politics of personal destruction. Jeff, until you've had 29 fully SWAT-clad FBI agents swarm your home at 6 o'clock in the morning to arrest you for the first time, non-violent crime of allegedly lying to Congress about under oath in your voluntary testimony to the House about Russian collusion that never actually took place. You haven't lived, but as I recall, they raided your home, did they not?
They did, Roger. And look, I actually think as I tell you that story a little bit, you'll see that they learned from their experiences with you how to try to, perfect their tools of look, let's just not put a fine point on it, of evil. So, my wife and family were away visiting my in-laws in Atlanta. So luckily, they were not home. I think my wife would not have taken it well. But there was massive banging on my door at 7 a.m. I got, my first thought was, I don't know, maybe a neighbor's in trouble, maybe, the house is on fire or something. So I just grabbed a dress shirt I wore, which I'd strewn on the floor, the kind of thing I wouldn't have done if my wife were home. I would have dutifully hung it up. But since I was batching it for a day, I, rushed down the stairs, opened the door, and I saw, about 20 armed agents of various kinds. It would turn out to be investigators from the DOJ Inspector General's office, and for the life of me, I still don't really understand how the Inspector General's office would have jurisdiction over a former Justice Department official. This raid against me happened in June of 2022, and then some police detectives from the Fairfax County Police, and that's where I think they learned from your experience, right? So, they filmed you to try to embarrass you and your wife. CNN was tipped off about that, as I remember the story. They even got, an advanced copy of the sealed indictment or information against you, which is all completely improper. And, they blasted that up on CNN. So it turns out that the DOJ IG does not, their agents don't have body cams. So, okay, so what do you do? So they, I think they ginned up bringing along the Fairfax County police detectives because they do have body cams. And they took eventually the body cam footage and they splashed that up on CNN to embarrass me like they did against you. And they also went to my neighbors, CNN did, and offered to pay them for pictures of me and my family so that they could essentially dox me. To their credit, none of my neighbors took them up on that offer, which I'm grateful for. But it just shows you that it's a total weaponization and combination of the Biden administration, Congress, and the media. And what's the congressional angle? After they raided my house and took all my electronics, and after they did things like refuse to show me the warrant initially until I gave them a Fourth Amendment lecture, and then they still, to this day, kept the affidavit behind the warrant secret. So I don't even know why they, thought they had probable cause to come to my house. The next day after the raid, and later that evening, they raided John Eastman out in the West. The day after that, they had a hearing focused on me where my former Justice Department colleagues testified against me. So no one is going to tell me that the January 6th committee had a hearing coincidentally focused on attacking me the day after the Biden DOJ raided my house and that they were not working together. That's just totally implausible, Roger.
All right, folks, if you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to former Assistant Attorney General Jeff Clarke, and we will be right back. And this is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC Radio. We're talking to Jeff Clarke, the former Assistant Attorney General under President Donald Trump, a man who is unfairly under attack, fighting for his legal and perhaps even his actual life. And I wanted to have him on today so he can finally tell his side of the story. Jeff, you mentioned when we were talking earlier that they won't even give you access to all of the records that you need to defend yourself. Tell us about that.
Sure. So, several Fridays back, more than a month at this point, in open court, it came out from one of the lawyers who works for Fani Willis that they have at least one piece of, correspondence with the White House and maybe with the Justice Department asking for permission for former DOJ officials in the Trump administration to testify, presumably against me. And the New York Times reported that DOJ refused consent to Fani Willis to allow them to testify. So we asked for copies of that. And then we also learned there's, more than one piece of correspondence with the White House. So clearly there's some kind of coordination going on. We want to see that correspondence, and we want to see why permission for them to testify was denied. And we think that this is evidence actually that could just get me out of the Fani Willis indictment in a very clear way. So we asked for access to it, and we argued that it was Brady information. And for your listeners, Brady information is exculpatory information, right, which the government has a due process obligation to turn over. And clearly Fani Willis didn't want to turn it over, refused to turn it over. We needed an order to get it. And the rationale for deciding not to turn it over is that it's not exculpatory. In other words, it doesn't show anything about my conduct. It just shows that witnesses against me might not be available. But of course, if there are no witnesses that can be brought to be put in front of a jury, then a case would collapse. And, if you're a prosecutor like Fani Willis and you know that you can't have witnesses come in, then how could you possibly have brought my name to the grand jury and asked for an indictment? So, and then it turned out that after the judge reviewed the correspondence, which we haven't seen, in camera, which means only he looked at it, like we didn't get to look at it, he put it under seal. So I don't know what the coordination was. We can't see it. And we think there's a major due process issue with that, Roger. But it's emblematic of the problems in this prosecution, overblown, overstretched prosecution that Fani Willis brought, and that the mainstream media constantly props up, and that they had Michael Isikoff write a whole book with special access to her and access to secret documents, et cetera. I mean, it's just not the way prosecutors should run. It is a violation of the American system and our Constitution in very basic ways.
Yeah, how coincidental. Mike Isikoff, the same man the FBI leaked the Steele dossier to in order to get him to publish it so they could then point it out to the judge as proof that it was real. Now being given access to sealed information, including, I think, grand jury testimony, to write a book talking about how Fani Willis is the smartest, greatest, most courageous prosecutor of all time. Somehow I don't think that book is going to sell very well. Jeff, I know you're headed towards a hearing. Actually, the trial, administrative trial, I guess, begins before the D.C. bar this coming Tuesday. This has to be extraordinarily expensive. I'm grateful that your wife was not home when they raided your home, because my wife still to this day has nightmares, has night terrors about that horrific event. How can people help you? Where can they go to help you in this epic fight?
Well, thank you, Roger. My Give, Send, Go is www.givesendgo.com/Jeff Clarke, just JEFFCLARK. And I'd appreciate any help, because it is very expensive. And I'm not just facing litigation in the bar. I'm facing the Fani Willis case. I'm facing my attempt to remove that to federal court. I have an 11th Circuit appeal pending about that. I've removed the bar case as well to federal court. I have a D.C. Circuit appeal pending about that. I mean, I am involved in so much litigation just for doing my duty at the Justice Department during the Trump administration and wanting to do it energetically, that you can't even shake a stick at all of it. So any help is much appreciated. And also the Give, Send, Go site lets people send prayers, which my wife and I and kids also appreciate.
All right. We are out of town, unfortunately. Please, one more time, givesendgo.com/Jeff Clarke. Please, folks, be generous. I've been in this situation. He is a man fighting for his life. He has done nothing wrong other than zealously represent his client and render his legal opinion. Jeff Clarke, thank you so much for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Thank you very much, Roger. Appreciate it.
God bless you.